Holy fuck, I'm filming a video. Hey guys, it's Kayla and today I'm here to talk about the books I read in October. Okay, so for October, I read a total of 9 books this month. 6 of them were audiobooks and 3 of them were physical books. And then I attempted to participate in 2 readathons, the Spookathon and the Spooktober-thon. Wait, the Spooktober. I had wanted to participate in Spookathon, but I did post some Instagram photos and that's about it. However, if you have seen in some of my other videos, I did participate in Sbooktober and I did participate this month in Sbooktober and as well as the Sbooktacular Readathon thing, which was so fun. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for creating it. Please do a Christmas one, please, please. Okay, so let's get into the books. The first book I finished in October. I technically had just started at the end of September, and that was Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, aka my new favorite book. I love Neil Gaiman, however, Neverwhere is just right up my alley. It's basically like an adult version of Alice in Wonderland, kind of. I think that's the best way to kind of generally describe it. It's about this average man who's living an average life, and he stumbles upon this girl in the street, and he takes it upon himself to help her, and then his life just gets turned upside down, and he discovers the world of London Below. London Below is basically just what it sounds like. It's the sewers and the subway stations below London. However, average people of London can't see the people that live in London Below, basically. Or if they do, they can like barely hear them, or they barely pay attention to them. Besides London Below, the best part of this book was the characters. There are many other variations of the story, like there's a BBC radio show program about it. There's a BBC television show miniseries, I think, about it. A new graphic novel just came out for it, and as of right now it is a standalone, but Neil Gaiman is writing a second story, but I think it's gonna be more of a companion novel, like it's just gonna be in the world of London Below versus being a direct sequel to Neverwhere. And then the next book I technically read was still part of the Neverwhere audiobook, and that was How the Marquees Got His Coat Back. And this is a novella about one of the characters in Neverwhere, the Marquis de Carabas, who is just a delicious anti-hero. And it's just a novella about him getting his coat back in the world of London Below. I gave it 4 stars. It was very enjoyable. It was fun to hear a little bit of a backstory about this character that we got to know so well in Neverwhere. Okay, so after this I started Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I listened to this as an audiobook as well. This was painful to get through. It was like an 18-hour audiobook. The narrator was just boring, monotone, blah. This one I only gave 3 stars. It took me like 2 weeks to read. It kind of put me in a slump. I was expecting a lot more. Salem's Lot is about this small town in Maine that kind of has a cloud over it. Our main protagonist comes to this town to write a book about it, basically. And when he's new to town, there's also another set of characters that are new to town, and things happen. I personally didn't find it scary. A lot of the scary scenes were kind of just, it was left to your imagination, like what happened to these people. And that was like everybody. Like that was like most of the scenes in this book. Okay, so after I finally finished Salem's Lot, I jumped right into Misery by Stephen King. It's the first book in the Hot Mess book club that I'm participating in, and I had like a day and a half to read this. I literally finished it like 30 minutes before the live show was up for the book. And oh my gosh, this was so good. 5 stars. Such like a 180 from Salem's Lot. It was so good. It was so terrifying. It was probably the scariest book I've ever read. Misery is about this writer, this very well-known famous writer, who essentially finds himself with this woman who is a super fan, and it's just his time with her, and she wants him to write a novel just for her, and that's about it, and it's terrifying. So after these heavy books, I decided to read something lighter, at least light for me. I read 3 Wishes by Liane Moriarty, and this was great. I gave it 3 stars, however, I think it'd be more like 3.5, 3.75. It was good, it was light, contemporary novel about a set of triplets, these 3 sisters, and just their lives, their interpersonal relationships with the people around them and themselves. And as all of the other Moriarty books I have read, there's some twists and turns and connections and things that happen, and it was great. Okay, and then the rest of these books are from the Sbooktacular Readathon that I participated in, and I completed it. The first book I read was Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. I listened to this as an audiobook. It was a great conclusion to the story. I gave it 4 stars. And this counted as my book of choice. This is the sequel to This Savage Song, which I'm sure you've heard about. It's just kind of a dystopian United States where monsters exist, and it's just kind of the relationships and the life living with monsters and humans that essentially create these monsters. Okay, and then I read The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket, which was actually my first ever reread. I listened to this as an audiobook as well. I gave it 4 stars. It was like a 2-hour audiobook, which was awesome. And also the audiobook was a full cast, and so there was different voices for all the characters, so everyone just kind of talked when they were supposed to talk, and then the narrator, as Lemony Snicket, who was also kind of a character in the series, played the narrator. So it was like listening to one of those like old-time radio shows, which I really liked, except for one part. There was a time where Sunny was like crying in the background for like 2 minutes solid, and I was listening to this at work with earbuds in, and I almost stopped it because it was that annoying, but other than that, it was great. I'm sure you guys know what The Bad Beginning is. The first book in a series of unfortunate events, which is about the Baudelaire orphans and their journey through home to home after their parents had passed, and just the series of unfortunate events that is their lives. And that book went for the first book in a series, and it counted for a book set in the past, because essentially Lemony Snicket, the author / character in the series, is documenting the happenings and the events of these orphans, and he's writing it in these novels. So essentially these happenings have already happened, so that's why it happened in the past. And then I had read In a Dark Dark Room and Other Scary Stories by Alvin Schwartz. I had used green ribbon. I turned it into, I always remembered it as the red ribbon, but essentially it's the green ribbon in that book for my scary story for Sbooktober. And this was fun. This definitely took me back to 2nd grade. I vividly remember all these pictures and the stories. Obviously, I've always remembered the red ribbon story. And then another story that I often tell when I tell scary stories is, I think it's called like The Hitchhiker. It's the story where this man picks up this hitchhiker on the road, and he takes him home, and he finds that he has left his sweater in the back of his car. He goes back to the home where he dropped the hitchhiker off, and it turns out that sweater had belonged to their son, who had passed away years before. So it's like, oh, he picked up a ghost. So anyways, it's very nostalgic. Obviously, there's other variations of these stories that are much scarier. However, this is obviously intended for kids, and it was definitely a quick, fun read for this readathon. The challenges that worked for was a book with orange on the cover, and also read a book at night. I didn't give a rating for it in a Dark Dark Room because it is for like elementary kids, and I just don't feel like, it's very nostalgic, and yeah, I just don't feel right giving it a star rating, if you know what I mean. And then my last book for the Sbooktacular Readathon and for the month of October was Frostbud by Ellie Blake. This was a great read. This, in my opinion, is like what I consider light and fluffy, and it's definitely not light and fluffy, but as far as fantasies go. Frostblood is a YA fantasy about this world. There are people who have magical powers dealing with ice and cold and things like that nature, and they are the Frostbloods, and then there are Firebloods who can control fire and heat and things like that. And they do not get along. There is a ton of lore and prophecy, which is like my favorite part of this novel, about the Frost and Firebloods. It was fun. Basically, there's a Fireblood girl who lives in the land that is controlled by Frostbloods. She lives in the land of Frostbloods. She's a Fireblood, and things happened. There's tons of mixed reviews on this on Goodreads, and I think it's just because it is pretty tropey and cliche, but in the best way. I really enjoyed it. That's what I mean by it's light and fluffy. It's very tropey and kind of has been done before, but I don't know. So if you read a ton of fantasies, like all you read is fantasies, you probably won't like this. If you don't read a lot of fantasies, you may enjoy this. Or if you're in a reading slump, or you just want to read it, I guess. I liked it. I mean, and Frostblood counted as a fantasy book and a book with magic in it. So for the Sbooktacular Readathon, I completed all 7 challenges by reading 4 books, and I don't know, my stats are on Twitter. How many pages I read. But it was so fun. I had such a blast this reading month, even though Salems Lot dragged ass for like 2 weeks or longer. So yeah, those are the books I read this month. Let me know if you guys have read any of these, or if you're interested in picking any of them up, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!